I need to tone it down, but I don't want to because I'm so excited. We're talking about Charmed today. And I'm so excited because this show is such a comfort watch. It's so nostalgic. It's one of those shows you tend to watch maybe when you're having a sick day, and it's just so amazing. I have such a special place in my heart for this show. As you can tell by the title, Charmed is one of those shows that was maybe too much of a good thing, that was dragged on for a bit too long, but I want to talk about where it started to go a little bit downhill and maybe wasn't quite as well thought out as it was in the beginning, which was like the golden era of the show in my opinion. But I'm so happy to talk about it with you guys today. So before we get into it, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot to unpack here. And by the way, if you haven't seen Charmed, I don't think it would matter too much because I'm going to explain stuff pretty well. But Charmed was a show that lasted for 8 seasons and it amassed a cult following. Charmed is an Aaron Spelling production, and he's also worked on Charlie's Angels and Beverly Hills 90210, which is crazy because I like both of those things. Centered around women, this group of sisters, and one of the stars is Phoebe, who's acted by Alyssa Milano, who you might have seen recently in Insatiable and Brazen on Netflix, but when she was younger she was actually part of the design inspo for The Little Mermaid Ariel. Also Rose McGowan as Paige, you might know from Scream when she was younger. That was a really big hit for her. And Holly Marie Combs played Piper, and she actually went on to be Aria's mum, Ella Montgomery, in Pretty Little Liars, which is so cool, and I love that actress. I do apologize, by the way, if I'm pronouncing their names wrong. In fact, I'm sure I am. But there was also Shannen Doherty.
ABC News exclusive interview with actress Shannen Doherty opening up.
But she played Prue, and you may actually recognize her from Beverly Hills 90210 because that was another big project she did. In around 2018, a reboot was made of Charmed. It was more diverse. That's a good thing because the original show wasn't very inclusive actually, so I'm glad that that was changed in the reboot. But the problem with the reboot is that apparently it's not very good. Now I don't know, maybe it's great, I haven't seen for myself, but even if it was good, I'm not sure if I'd want to see it just because I have such a soft spot for the original. It was the same thing when I heard they were doing a live action of Fate the Winx Saga. As a kid, the original Winx Club was so special to me that the thought of it being potentially ruined or not quite how I imagined it in my head as a live action was enough for me to be anxious about watching it. But the show opens with this group of sisters, Phoebe, Prue and Piper. They discover this book of shadows in the attic and they unlock it and the magic within it, and then they learn that they're actually 3 of the most powerful witches ever, destined to protect the world. It's not particularly violent. They do fight, but often the demons are vanquished in a puff of smoke or they're stabbed, and it's not, I mean, I watched it quite young and honestly it's not a very disturbing show, and it relies more on character development and emotional stuff. Some of the creatures they fought were genuinely terrifying. There was this one guy who controls people with their worst fears, and I thought he was a very creepy villain, but others honestly were more comical than scary, like that one guy Shax who comes in around season 3. He's just so blue. Why is he so blue? He looks like a Smurf. He literally looks like a 50-year-old man who just smothered his face in blue paint. And sometimes the CGI and special effects weren't very good, so it kind of made it more funny than scary. But at other points, I swear, the show was actually kind of creepy. And also the show isn't just battles. Sometimes it involves time travel or them being stuck in a time loop and not realizing it. I think Charmed was the first show to think of certain things. I could do a whole video just recapping what happens to the girls throughout the show because it's so juicy and I could rave about it for hours. If this video gets enough thumbs ups, then I will do a part 2. The theme of witchcraft was first pitched to the show's creator, Constance M. Burge. She knew the idea of witches and wizards as riding on broomsticks and being covered in warts, and she didn't want to do something like that. She thought something more subtle would be interesting, like following a group of women who look like normal people, but they're actually witches. Then E. Duke Vincent said, you know what, we should actually focus more on family family values and have it be a show about a group of sisters who just happen to be witches, rather than a group of witches who just so happen to be sisters. And I think that's one of the reasons why the show excelled so much, is because there are lots of shows out there that focus on supernatural stuff, and there are lots of fantasy series. They're not that special. There's a lot of them out there that I just choose not to watch, to be honest, because I don't find it interesting. What makes Charmed so special is the focus on family and sisterhood. I'm telling you all the stuff I like about the show, but as the show went on, it did lose sight of some of the things that made it so good in the first place, and it started to go a little bit off the walls. The beginning of the show is my favourite. Seasons 1 to 4 I think are when the show was at its prime, and when it was very clear on what it was and what it had to offer. You actually care about what happens to these girls. When Prue died, it mattered, it was heart-wrenching. When Andy died, it had a purpose, it mattered, and especially because the girls are in so many life-threatening situations regularly, it is a challenge to keep a sense of interest and emotional depth and to keep it impactful when it's dragged on for so long and there's a repeat of things that we've already seen before. The constant boyfriends coming and going start to seem a bit annoying and repetitive rather than interesting, and characters like Leo, who are initially endearing, start to become a bit more naggy and irritating. I think it's just too long because it was so popular. Obviously they kept renewing it for more seasons, but I think there's a point where you do actually need to know when to end the show and when it's overstayed its welcome. Ahead of the third season, Constance and Burge, the executive producer, stepped down from her role, and she was still a creative consultant, but she didn't have as much of a key role in the show. She was becoming frustrated because she wasn't pleased with storylines in the third season, knowing that in the third and the fourth season they were going to be so much more focused on the girls' love lives rather than their relationships with each other. And she disagreed with Kern over bringing Cole Turner into the show as a love interest for Phoebe, because there was already enough focus on the show's already established couple, Piper and Leo. I have to say though, I didn't mind the introduction of Cole. I did like it. I did think it was overplayed a bit throughout the show and it got a bit annoying, but he is a good character, so I am glad he was brought in.
Does it change anything? Because you're still a demon.
One who's done unspeakable things.
You've awakened something in me, Phoebe. Something I thought had died a long time ago.
Despite the girls having more of a focus on their love lives in the third and the fourth season, I still love those seasons of the show. And even after Prue died in the season 3 finale, which we'll talk about later, I still loved season 4 when she was gone and a new sister was brought in, because the show really seamlessly introduces a new character, Paige, to the narrative with, in my opinion, what seems like an impossible task. They actually managed to pull it off and make it good. And season 4 has a lot to offer. The girls mourning Prue's death, having to adjust to this new member of the family, Paige. The season actually took place around the same time as 9/11, so collectively for the viewers there would have been a lot of negativity and grief. The only thing I don't like about season 4 is that it bails when it comes to Phoebe's potential storyline of going dark. She is prone to being evil more so than the other girls because she was born in the house, so she's very susceptible to the good and the evil magic there, and she could go either way. So when she becomes queen of the underworld in season 4, that was a choice that the writers made, to have her go to the dark side for a bit and to be corrupt, and it was very satisfying to watch, but they don't let it last for nearly long enough, and it seems like a cop-out. We had like 4 seasons of foreshadowing and clues that Phoebe had the potential to become very dark. A whole episode centered on a timeline where you could see in a past life she was nasty, and yet when it actually ends up happening in season 4 they don't properly commit to it, and it only lasts about an episode, and I just feel like, what a wasted opportunity. It could have been dragged out for way longer. Another thing that's interesting to note is when Constance Burge left around season 4, this resulted in changes in the story structure, because originally, like I said, the concept was each episode the girls face a completely different demon or threat. It doesn't matter where you pick up again because you're not going to miss anything, whereas with shows now, each episode ends in a cliffhanger, and it's designed to make you want to keep watching and to be addictive. But what I liked about Charmed is that each episode has its own unique resolution, But in season 4, these threats introduced to the show and villains are dragged out for maybe half a season, and they're a constant threat in the background. And I didn't think I would like it, but I actually really did. I like that it shakes up the structure of the show. It keeps it fresh and interesting. I like that it makes the threats actually seem greater because they're not defeated too easily. However, after Constance left, it was straying away from witchcraft and sisterhood, which is what the focus of the show should be on. It was bringing in a lot of focus on the sisters' love lives, the girls being sucked into fairy tales, and bringing in these weird cliche characters like nymphs and Greek gods, gnomes and ogres, and the most ridiculous of all, magic school. The girls being transformed into superheroes. That to me speaks of, we are really running out of ideas and we don't know where we're going, and we're a bit lost. Also, around seasons 5 to 8, the girls' outfits were becoming increasingly revealing. It felt more exploitative and unnatural in the later seasons. Like when Phoebe was turned into a mermaid, her whole mermaid look was a little bit revealing, and I don't think that was necessary.
This body. I've never felt so much power before.
Maybe I should leave you two alone.
No, just because the witch is in me doesn't mean there's not still room for you too.
Tempting.
The sexualization of women's bodies. What was the message that you want people to understand about that?
When I think about the 90s, you watch reruns of Charmed, and I'm running around in like a bra and underwear for 80% of every episode. We had to be scantily clad in order for that show to be a hit.
The show was starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel. One of the most ridiculous episodes, in my opinion, that I still laugh about now is this blue moon episode in around season 7. The idea is that on the second blue moon of a year, occurring once every 50 years, the charmed ones turn into werewolf-like creatures, and they completely lose their sense of logic, and they will attack anyone, including elders and people that are meant to be on their side and good magical beings. That's when the show had really jumped the shark, in my opinion. I was like, oh, this is really dumb. You literally see the girls transform into these terribly CGI'd werewolves.
Pretty.
What the hell?
And then we have the introduction of a character called Billy in the final season, and that was not a good creative decision, I have to say. Her character was quite irritating.
There's no wrath like a woman scorned.
She's very like larger than life and comical, and somehow in a show like Charmed it just doesn't work, and I'm not sure the actress was really built for the role at that time. Another thing I didn't like in season 8 is the show's desperate need to wrap things up. It was rushing stuff involving the girls' love lives, and I was like, you know what, if you're gonna rush it, then you should have built on it earlier and planned this out earlier. It wasn't really character driven, it was very inorganic, and it was more like they felt obligated to do it rather than it feeling true to the characters. For instance, they need Phoebe to be married off with kids to this guy Coop, and it just felt odd considering how much time was spent on her relationship with Cole, and then that was tossed aside, and I was like, oh, this isn't good. Additionally, Daryl disappears from the show in season 8, and he was this cop, a mortal being who's always there helping the girls throughout the whole show. I really love his character, and I think he's just such a sweetheart, and having him disappear was so jarring, especially considering how much he's done for the girls. I know they had budget cuts in the final season, and so that's why the actor was written out, but honestly it's such a shame. Additionally, time travel in the earlier parts of the show, like seasons 1 to 4, were my favorite parts of the show. I thought they were brilliant because they were used in moderation, not overdone, but they were so juicy when they were there. Even if it wasn't time travel, just the idea of maybe a whole town being stuck in a time loop. And also it was used with purpose, often to introduce the girls to aspects of their family history or to give the audience context about the girls' childhoods. But in the later seasons, especially with stuff involving the girls, like Piper's son traveling back in time to meet her or whatever that was. It just ended up being more irritating and kind of exhausting. But I do want to talk about the girls now, the main characters, and I think we'll start with Prue because she was there when the show was at its peak, and she was an example of why the show was so good because all her character arcs were really well written. The part I've been looking forward to the most is actually talking about the individual girls because I've got a lot to unpack. In terms of Prue, she's the oldest child, and so she's the most uptight because her childhood was kind of stripped away from her when her mum died, and she had this huge responsibility to take care of her younger sisters, and she finds it hard to let go of the need to take care of them even when they're grown and they can look after themselves. When her mum left, it really gave Prue some abandonment issues, which is why she struggles to say I love you to her sisters for a long time, and eventually she overcomes that and starts opening her heart again. When Andy died, that just made it worse because he died at the end of season 1 and he was an old flame of hers and she'd always loved him, but then he dies trying to save her, and again it just gives her this fear of being left behind, and it gives her a fear of death too, and there's a whole arc around Prue needing to accept that death is natural. Prue is obviously uptight. She's not great with emotions.
Everything. There's no reason why the chandelier should not be working.
She's running the house. She's the breadwinner of the family. She's making the money, and she's very sometimes over controlling of what her sisters do. And when I thought of it that way, I was like, she's literally a dad. She is that father figure because the girls didn't have their dad. He wasn't there, and so she had to take over in his place. In terms of her magical gifts, she has telekinesis, so she can move stuff with her eyes and with her mind. She also learns astral projection, which is when she literally pushes herself out of her own body, so there are two of her doing two different things at once, and she learns how to do that when she feels this strong wish that she could be in two places at once, and then she actually does it. When you think about it though, what she's doing is telekinesis, just an extended form, because she's pushing her own astral form out of her own body and controlling it. Constance, who was still the producer at the time, said Prue, who is very in her mind, very smart, is someone who it seemed to make sense would have powers that would be mind related, hence the power of telekinesis. The middle sister, Piper, always has had trouble with time because she's people pleasing simply by her nature. That would be a good power for her, the ability to freeze time. And then because the younger sibling, Phoebe, was viewed as having no vision of the future because she was spontaneous and lived in the moment, I thought it would be nice to give her the power of premonition, because there's something so ironic in the ability to see everyone else's future but her own. I truly understand the arguments as to why people don't like Prue. Out of all the sisters, I strongly believe that she's the one the fandom disliked the most, and they were like, why is she the main character? She's alright, but she's kind of a drag. She's a party pooper. She takes stuff very seriously. She's not very good at having a joke. She's not really a go with the flow kind of person when the show starts. She can be bossy and kind of mean and snippy and arrogant as well, and very judgmental. When the show was airing, there were a lot of preteens and teenagers watching it who I'm sure found her a very irritating reminder of one of their parents perhaps, or an overbearing auntie. When you compare her to someone like Paige, who comes into the show in the 4th season, you can see the difference, because when Paige comes in, she is a bit ditzy and clueless about how the world works, so she is annoying, honestly. She keeps messing things up and she's not working with the team because she's still adjusting to being part of the family, but that's nothing compared to how Prue was in season 1. So I understand why someone wouldn't like Prue, and I don't think you're wrong to think that, but I love Prue. She's such a real person. She's so authentic. She has such a powerful presence on screen. I thought the actress acted her so well, with so much heart and soul, especially in scenes that needed drama and intensity, because the other actresses like Phoebe brought a lot of comedy, but the actress who played Prue was very good at the more heavy and serious scenes. In season 1, Prue struggles to express love and open her heart again, and so she goes through multiple things that teach her how to do that, like her old ex-boyfriend Andy coming back and her falling in love with him again. And then this other guy, Bane, who's like an ex-mob boss and also a guy in prison, she has this romance with. She starts to loosen up a bit. She starts to express love more easily and be a bit more playful and experiment with things she's never done before. And I love this character arc for her. And in season 3, Prue is such an amazing character. She really comes into her own, and she starts to just, I mean, if she'd stayed alive, I don't know where else she would have gone, because I felt like she grew so much in season 3, and there were endless opportunities for her with her character. Rue starts astral projecting in her sleep, and she starts traveling to places in the middle of the night. Her alter ego, when she's going out at night, is very bold and sexual and adventurous, which is funny because that's totally a part of Prue that she maybe doesn't feel fully comfortable with and she pushes down, because she also became a lot like that when she needed to disguise herself as Miss Hellfire. This explains the change in her hair, because in season 1 she has this very structured, prissy kind of bob, and then in season 2 it starts to become longer and more curly, and then in season 3 the hair is a bit more wild again, which really signifies that she's literally letting her hair down and letting herself go. Out of all the girls in the show, Prue was the one who was the most likely to suppress parts of herself she didn't feel that she liked, and it explains why she's turned into a dog and she gets 2 different identical Prues because of this spell, and it explains why she's also transformed into a man when they need to fight off this succubus. She's the one that tries to lock those parts away, and so they're begging to be expressed.
Who the hell is that? Oh no. TJ! You came.
Had to beat the cops. I wouldn't let them take you.
Prue! What the hell is going on?
This is why I love Prue as a character. She is so complex. However, I do have a few issues with her. I don't think she's perfect, and she's a bit of a Mary Sue, and that's why I went from thinking that Prue was my favorite to switching for a while to Phoebe being my favorite, and it was that way for years. I understand that maybe she's the most powerful of the sisters, but the show pushes this a little bit too hard and it does get irritating. Like in one episode, Prue gets a stalker who's completely obsessed with her and wants her life, and it was for no reason either, and none of the other girls had something like that happen to them. And she's presented as the strongest, smartest sister, but yet Charmed is a show very much centered, like I said, about teamwork. It's not one of those traditional fantasy series about the lone male hero who sets off on a quest by himself. Charmed is about the power of 3, the fact that the women put themselves in danger when they try and do stuff by themselves, and they're more powerful as a group. That's why they're trying to convince Paige in the 4th season to move in with them, because they know that they're more powerful when they're living together. So that's why it always irritated me that Prue was presented as the most powerful, because I was like, shouldn't they all be equals? And it doesn't help too that the other sisters look up to Prue and almost idolize her, especially Piper. They want her approval, and it's limiting their ability to grow. And that's why when Prue died, it was almost a blessing in disguise, because it was only when Prue died that the other sisters could finally fully grow into themselves. And when Paige was part of the group, I think it was a much more balanced dynamic, and their relationships with each other were balanced. Her and her sister Piper are attacked by Shax, that blue demon guy, the Smurf. They're shot through the wall. I remember being so shook when that happened, because I did not expect it at all. Now, I've read varying reports about what happened, but the common agreement seems to be that the actress was going to stay on the show. She actually ended up leaving because she didn't get along with Alyssa Milano, who played Phoebe. It's kind of ironic that the show is so much about sisterhood, and yet it seems like a real shambles. Prue's death was a really hard reminder for the girls. The whole family structure had to change because suddenly there's only 2 sisters left. So Piper becomes the older sister when she's been sheltered her whole life and a people pleaser, and now she has to grow out of her shell, become less shy and subservient, and actually take control of the household. And then Phoebe becomes the middle sister suddenly, because then Paige, this other sister they never knew they had, comes in, because basically after Prue died, the writers had 2 options. One, get a new actress to play Prue, which would have been bloody weird, or have her die and bring in a new sister the other girls didn't even know existed, and they went for the latter, and it ended up working. I think of season 3 as a real tribute to Prue, because there's so much focus on her development, and there are a lot of clues in there about death, and there's a lot of foreshadowing there that she'll die, even the crow being at the window and Prue needing to come to terms with death, and all those sorts of things to me hint that something's going to happen to her. I don't like the way the death happens and the way it was filmed. I thought it was very clunky. the showrunners didn't really fully believe that it would be the end, and they still thought that maybe the actress would change her mind and want to come back. But another thing that made it so weird is that the girls were never looking at photos of Prue. Prue was never visiting them as a spirit. It wasn't awfully done, but I think it could have been executed better. But the next sister I want to talk about is Phoebe, who ends up being the middle sister when the whole family structure is reorganized. And for a long time, Phoebe was my favorite, and I still have such a soft spot for her. I'd say she's probably the most popular sister. To make up for initially only having a passive power, which is premonition, Phoebe develops martial arts skills so she can actually better assist her sisters when they fight evils. But as the series progresses, she gains the powers of levitation, so she can float up in the air, and empathy, so it's good. She gets more skills, because initially she was kind of gutted that she only had premonition, because she was like, how is this helping me? How is this serving me? And she felt like the other sisters had such cool skills, like being able to freeze time. When you think about it, at the beginning of the show, we know that she's really unmotivated. She had a bunch of jobs she couldn't pin down. She's irresponsible and doesn't take stuff seriously. And then she takes up studying, and then she becomes an advice columnist. And then I think she becomes a student again. She's the one who followed a sign, a clue that she needed to go up to the attic. And then she's the one that unlocks the Book of Shadows. She's the one that gets enthusiastic about magic. She's the first one to start experimenting with writing spells, and she's the one that loves being a witch. She was excited to do it. Who goes out looking for people to save using her skills. She is looking for adventure, for a sense of purpose, for a reason to be here. And I think that's why so many people love Phoebe, because so many of us feel the same way. We feel a bit lost. She's also, in the final few seasons, taking her job really seriously, working really hard, almost overworking herself, which is quite ironic when you compare that to her sense of aimlessness in the beginning of the show. Even the fact that Phoebe learns that she, out of all the sisters, is the most likely to go evil, it makes her again think about her identity. Who am I meant to be? Am I meant to be evil? And she really freaks out when she learns about her past self, who was nasty and betrayed her sisters, because it made her think, who am I? Am I meant to be like that? Because it felt so real. Alyssa Milano also brings so much joy and charm and charisma to the character. Like, she has this huge, beautiful smile, good comedic timing, and I think that's what makes us like her so much, is this effortless charm she has. I think what makes us like Phoebe is the way Alyssa plays her. Speaking of Cole though, he was her main love interest, right? I really liked them, genuinely. I thought they were very well developed, and I think it's a real shame that they weren't given the respect they deserved as a couple and they didn't end up together, because Cole did his best to be good for Phoebe. He loved her. He had half a demon in him, which was messing him up, but I think he really cared about her. And normally I don't want a redemption arc. I'm like, not everyone needs a redemption arc, but with Cole, I wanted to see him be redeemed. I wanted him to succeed. There were a few points where she was saying, you can't change Cole, you can never be good. What he needs to be good is the support, the belief, the encouragement. But when she kept saying, oh, shut up, Cole, I don't trust you, I don't love you anymore, you can't be good, it ended up pushing him further away, and oh, I don't know, I didn't like it. She'd spent so much time idealizing Cole in the early stages, putting way too much energy into the relationship, doing anything for him, building him up so much in her head that when he ended up betraying her, her reaction is disproportionate, and she feels more betrayed than she should, because she's annoyed because she put so much into it. So maybe in that sense, she is better off with someone like Coop, who she ends up marrying, because he's stable and it's less of this intense, passionate thing. I feel like Coop is actually someone that she could build a long-term sustainable relationship with, whereas with Cole, it was like it was really intense and then it just went out with a bang really fast. Just keep in mind, I don't hate the guy she ends up with, but I feel like they put so much time on her with Cole that that's the only one that really makes sense, because of how much focus there was in this relationship, and they want us to root for them, so they should have ended up together, you know? And Alyssa Milano really enjoyed filming scenes with Julian, who played Cole, and she said in an interview that he's so delicious, his body's gorgeous. I'm sweating just talking about Julian. Oh my god, I'm just imagining how bad that would be if like a guy said that about a female co-star. The point is, she obviously thinks he's a lovely person, he's a lovely, attractive guy, and that explains their very intense chemistry on screen. So much of the show deals with good and evil, black or white, good or bad. And I liked that Cole brought a bit of nuance that was really needed. Cole is one of the best main male characters on the show, if not the best male character, and I think that he was robbed of the kind of ending that he deserved. I know also he was killed off because the actor had another project he was going to go and do, but even that just upset me, the fact that he couldn't have stayed on the show. The only thing I didn't like is the fact that Phoebe was so obsessed with him, and that was one of the reasons why she could never be my favourite character, because she was for so long, but when I look back in it, certain episodes were just her being completely obsessed with him and fangirling over him to the point that that was her personality. She was just so love-struck and so almost stupid with love every time she was with him in like earlier seasons, and it really irritated me. Another thing the writers did wrong is that they made him really good in the beginning. He had that healthy balance of nuance, but they started making him too mean towards the end of the show. They just made him insanely toxic. He was getting crazier and crazier, and he was losing what made him so good in the beginning. Oh yes, we need to talk about Piper's huge character arc and lots of development, because she learns to stop being so shy and submissive and such a people pleaser. But she's the least enthusiastic about being a witch out of all the girls. She's the one, when things go wrong, she brings it back to, I knew being a witch was terrible. It was the worst thing that's ever happened to us. It's the source of all evil. It's the root of all our problems. I could never relate to Piper as much, because one of her biggest issues is this feeling of, I just want things to be stable. I want to have a life that I can rely on, that's consistent, that's regular. And I just can't relate to that, because I like things to be different. Her needing to accept change takes literally the whole show for her to finally come to terms with it. It takes her so long, and sometimes she makes progress and then she takes 2 steps back again, you know, which is very realistic. And when she opens that nightclub, it's like that one place she goes whenever she's sad, and it's that one stable thing. Maybe that's due to having all this family upheaval when she was younger, like having her mum die, that she wants things to stay the same because now she has this fear of things unexpectedly changing perhaps. But that's one of the problems with her relationship with Leo in the beginning, is that he is not stable. He's not just the guy next door. He has a job that forbids them from being together. It's like a forbidden love thing, and also it's a very demanding job, so he's always being called away from her to do other things. And so, you know, she can't like come home to him every day, and sometimes there's distance in their relationship that messes it up. And so at one point she thinks she should give up on him just because she craves that normalcy so much, that stability, which is one of the reasons she starts going out with Dan, because he's like the guy next door. Prue and Phoebe grow their magic a lot in the first season. They develop it, they experiment. But even though Piper learns to freeze time, that's kind of it. She doesn't really accelerate anything because she's stagnant. She doesn't want to go outside this bubble she's in. She doesn't wants to go and become a witch. She's resentful about it. Something that bothers me is that as the series progresses, although she does get, you know, a sharp tongue, which is fine, it becomes a bit too sharp, and sometimes she was making sarcastic comments that came across as more mean-spirited than sassy. And she starts whining a lot as well, like, oh, I just want a normal life. I'm so sick of this. And it's like, bitch, stop complaining. It's never going to change. You can't keep focusing on the things you can't control. But she kept focusing on it anyway. Also, another reason why I could never fully get behind Piper as like my favorite of the sisters is because I didn't love her relationship with Leo. I liked it in the earlier stages, but I felt like they became boring and it became dry, and they should have noticed that and like separated and moved on. But it's like we're being forced into thinking that this relationship is perfect and it's being shoved down our throats, but yet I always felt so much more of an organic connection between her and Dan, and her and, you know, that episode Dead Man Walking or something, where she helps a dead man. She had so much more chemistry with him even. Every time I didn't like Piper, where I was like, she's properly irritating me, it was because of something that happened with Leo. Those are the reasons why she was never like my favorite. But now I want to talk about Paige, because she's actually my favorite out of all the girls. The show could have become so shit after Prue died, but even when the storylines were bad in like seasons 7 and 8, even when things were a bit boring, the one thing that kept it good was Paige. There is endless potential with Paige too, because she's introduced in season 4 and we know nothing about her, so she brings all these new opportunities for storylines and cool family dynamics. She brings a sense of mystery to the Halliwell family again, because by season 4 we hadn't really explored much of the family, and it felt like we knew everything there was to be known about the family. I know it sounds dumb, like, oh, she's the long lost sister. It sounds like such a cliche, but the best part is that it actually seemed believable and it made sense, because we knew that. I think the mum had an affair with a whitelighter. We already knew that from earlier seasons, and it was just a coincidence, but they could have used that to say that Paige was the secret love child of those two, and that's completely plausible. So that was what made it good too, is it didn't seem too much like the show was jumping the shark or trying to treat the audience like we were stupid, and that's why I loved it. And I also really appreciated the way they introduced Paige's character, and they executed it as best they could. I don't really know how they could have done it better. When we first are introduced to Paige, she's chilling in her workplace as a social worker, and then she sees this newspaper, and there's a little obituary section in it dedicated to Prue Halliwell, who's recently died. And Paige obviously knows nothing about the Halliwells, but for some reason she's really drawn to this thing, and so she thinks she wants to actually go to the funeral. She says she felt like even though she never knew Prue, she kind of did, and she lost Prue too, which makes it sound almost as if they could have known each other and gotten along if they'd met. And something like that, I think, makes it very respectful to Prue, first of all, and it also shows that Paige isn't trying to take Prue's place or overshadow her, but it's just that she connects to Prue as well in the same way that a sister would. They make it a bit awkward, and it takes a long time for Paige to slowly be incorporated into the family, and she even at points feels left out because she sees how close Phoebe and Piper are, and she's like the third wheel, and it takes a while. And I really thought that was well done too, because it allowed us to also get comfortable with this idea of a new sister rather than being forced to like her and be really close with her when we barely know anything about her, because that would have just made everyone in the audience a bit uncomfortable, and they didn't do that. In terms of her gifts, she can orb. She can heal too then, because she's a white lighter, right? Different skills again, useful. And also she'd grown up as an only child, so she's not used to having siblings. She was raised by her adoptive parents who she actually cared about, but she has her own trauma involving their deaths. So when she comes to meet the Halliwell sisters, they've lost Prue, but Paige isn't unscarred. She's also had a lot of difficulties, and she's lost her adopted parents in a really traumatizing way, so they kind of bond over that, and it also makes you empathize with her. I felt like the chemistry in the early seasons between the initial sisters was very intense and emotional and genuine, and they do have a strong chemistry with Rose too, who plays Paige in the later seasons. They do like get along, but there was this intimacy there with Prue that they don't quite have in the same way with Paige. Needing to remind myself, oh wait, no, they're meant to be sisters actually, not friends. And over time she did grow into that sister role. It just took a while. Many fans of Charmed, therefore, I know value Prue more simply because she got there first and she was the original member, and they view Paige as the add-on. But honestly, to me, by the time I'd been watching the show for a long time, I was like, you know what, Paige is part of the family now. She really grew on me. What I like about Paige too is she's a bit like Phoebe in the sense that she does have this darkness within her, because in one of her past lives she was actually an evil enchantress. Although with Phoebe, what always made her turn dark was love, like some kind of guy turning her to the dark side to betray her sisters. But with Paige, it wasn't like a guy that would, you know, draw her to the dark side. It was actually wanting to be powerful. And as a teenager, she was actually very angry, very irresponsible, and a bit of a mess. And we have a whole storyline about her looking back at her childhood and feeling all this guilt, feeling like she didn't treat her parents well and wasn't grateful to them before their death, and she gets to go and make amends and redo that and actually be grateful to them and treat them well, which was so heartbreaking. I like that Charmed did things so uniquely. It was very inventive, and that makes it such a classic. I also love that it's such a female-oriented show. Women rule the screen, and I also like that the women drove so many of the jokes on this show, and it's very comedic, but it's the women making the jokes, and they're not just accessories to the men. It's a very strong theme throughout the show of the women trying to juggle their personal lives and being a witch, getting that balance right. But there's constantly a demon attack, but they're also trying to date normal human guys who might judge them for being witches and judge them for being different. And what I love about that is this is what would connect to so many female viewers the most, and I think that's why it's so popular, is because most women, especially older women who have kids, can relate to this enormous pressure, this dual burden. You also need to have a job to have a sense of purpose, or you're judged for just being a housewife. But also it's really important for you to be a housewife because your value is dependent on your relationship and you can't be single past 30, etc. But as a result, you're pulled in all these different directions, and it's so clever that the women on this show struggle with this exact thing, needing to do all these things constantly that are selfless for the greater good, as the elders tell them, and they're not allowed to use magic for personal gain. They have to use it to help people, even though it's putting them in danger and it's their destiny. As a result, because they're not allowed to tell anyone they're witches. They're doing all these amazing things in secret. An American author, Debbie, talked about how Charmed is a modern fairy tale, which I never considered, but her point made so much sense. Phoebe is obsessed with love, and so many of her storylines surround, has Phoebe given up on love, or does she still believe in love, right? Piper is really struck by innocence, and Paige is fascinated by the balance between good and evil and power, and Prue was constantly disguising herself, as we know, right? Those are themes of love, innocence, good and evil, disguise. Those are literally the pinnacle of fairy tale themes, and those are also huge themes in the show of Charmed as a whole, with the girls needing to disguise their identities, right? They have to be isolated, their magic has to be kept secret, and so their heroism goes unrecognized and unrewarded. All the girls want their fairy tale endings, and there is a big emphasis on weddings. All the girls get married and have kids, like happily ever after, right? And I don't think this is a coincidence, because like I said, there are multiple episodes where the girls are sucked into fairy tales and they become fairy tale characters. The show was literally shoving it in our face, and some of us, including myself, still didn't notice what they were trying to say. And that makes so much sense to me, and it explains why I was so obsessed with this show, because Charmed is literally one big fairy tale, which is so cute. I think this may have been my favorite video I've ever filmed. I had so much fun. Let me know in the comments who your favorite sister is and why. I will see you guys for my next video. Mwah.